Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema or sci-fi, your archbishop of banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your pharaoh of physical media, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I am robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations, the show about something, episode number 590. My God, the Seahawks, as we speak, are playing their last game of the season. They're already division championship. They're champions. They're playing the San Francisco 49ers. I expect they'll win. I don't know because I'm on talking with you right now. It's basically the end of the holidays. And the beginning of the new year really starts tomorrow. I know it's the 3rd of January, but let's face it, tomorrow's the first work day after all the holidays are over. A new year begins. I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually pretty optimistic about this year. I think together we can all move forward, and hopefully it'll be a great year. I'm hoping it'll be a great year. We shall see. Now, one of the things that I've always been sympathetic to is anyone who makes a feature film, specifically writer-directors, because usually people that are writer-directors have to live with films for a long time, longer than anyone, if they wrote it, or people that come on and they take a project on that they have to rewrite or something. And it can be a lonely process. It can be a long process. As many people know, a film that I worked on, not as a director, but as an editor, I've been working on for literally years. And then what's really interesting is all of that work, it doesn't really matter to audiences what happened, how it happened. What matters to them is the 90 minutes or 2 hours that you have to entertain them. And they don't care how what long process or what hell you went through to drag whatever you've dragged across the finish line to show them. They don't care. All they care about is that time, those minutes. And the one question is, are you not entertained? Maximus had it right. Are you not entertained? That's all that matters. And what's really interesting is when people are watching movies, no one's considering how long it took to get to the screen. Nobody cares how much money went into it because none of that matters. All of those details don't help when it comes to, well, did you entertain them? Was I entertained? Did you make a film that was worthy of my attention? And that, of course, is not easy to do. As a matter of fact, it's a very hard thing to do and to do it well. However, what I have always hated is when that question, were you or were you not entertained, which should be the first and foremost question on anyone's mind after they see a film. I loved it. I kind of liked it. I was wildly entertained. Whatever it is, does your audience have a response? Did they enjoy it? That's all that matters. Of course, in the business of filmmaking, money matters too. Did this movie make money? Of course. But from the artist's point of view, the writer-director, we all want it to make money, sure. But really, we want people to be entertained because there's a lot of movies that didn't make money, sometimes upon first release, that were wildly entertaining that took a long time to discover their audience. And from the business perspective, from Hollywood's perspective, they might not have been successful. But really, after 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, if a movie attains legendary status, even if it wasn't, say, a big earner when it first came out, well, the director, the writer-director, or the filmmakers can take solace in the fact that this movie did what it set out to do. And not only that, it endured the test of time. And audiences keep rediscovering movies over and over again. But I don't like it when something that is out of the filmmaker's control suddenly overshadows all the work that was done. And I read an article yesterday that made me think about this and ruminate on this idea. And while I haven't gone through the specific experience that this filmmaker is going through now, I did commiserate with her. And I wanted to share her story only because I've been thinking about it all day. So I figured, well, I would bring it to your attention. Now, there is a movie with Chloe Grace Moretz, who I'm a big fan of. I love Chloe Grace Moretz, and I just enjoy watching her. I think she has an interesting face, and I think she's an interesting actress. She has a new film that some would say is a B movie. Others would say maybe other things. But it's called Shadow in the Cloud. It's a war film. It's got a monster in it. Right up my alley. I mean, there's so many things about this movie that I can't wait to experience. I have not seen it. But it was directed by a woman named Roseanne Lang. I think it's how you pronounce her last name. Liang. Liang, or is it Liang? Roseanne Liang. Let's say Roseanne Liang. Well, this movie was originally written by Max Landis. And Max Landis, as you know, is John Landis' son. And he's written a number of things that had very, very high profile stuff, genre writer, and people know him from various things. He's made some really compelling YouTube videos. But of course, he ran afoul of a number of people because there are allegations that he was not exactly the greatest boyfriend in the world and that he abused people. And I can't speak to that. I have met Max Landis once in my life. He was on Collider Heroes, and I will say that my experience with him was very positive. He was very complimentary to me and my past work, and obviously he's very passionate and very knowledgeable, and he's very, very smart. I do not know what it's like to date Max Landis. I'm a straight man, so I never will. And I can't speak to any of those things. I do know how hard it is to make movies, how hard it is to write great scripts, and I did have admiration for him in the fact that he was achieving success. And he was writing a number of different kinds of things. So I can't speak to him personally or anything other than my experience with him. But anyway, I wanted to... apparently, there has now been some controversy because in the Shadow of the Cloud is being judged because of Max Landis's involvement in penning the original draft of the script. And Roseanne Liang extensively rewrote him, and apparently, and this is the part that bothers me, is that the film is not being judged apparently on its own merits in some quarters. That people are now, look, when a movie is made, there's sometimes hundreds of people that work on a film. Hundreds. And the fact that in this day and age, one person's conduct can overshadow all of the work. And I understand in some cases it's really difficult, the old chestnut, can you separate the art from the artist? But in this case, I think that the controversial artist involved was separated from this project long before it actually was made. And yet, once again, there's a controversy that has erupted because of his initial involvement that is now spilled over and is reflecting on the filmmakers and interfering with whether or not, in my perspective, the movie should be judged on its own merits. Does it succeed? Does it entertain you? Again, I've not seen this movie, but it's right up my alley, and I definitely am going to see it because it sounds to me like a lot of fun. I love the trailer. I'm like, I'm in. Anyway, so it's called In the Shadow of the Cloud, and this article was in the Hollywood Reporter and Heat Vision. Brian Davids published this article on the 1st of January in the Hollywood Reporter, and I wanted to talk about it. So here's the article. And Roseanne Liang has dreamed about making an action film for as long as she can remember. And after putting herself in position to finally direct one in the form of Shadow in the Cloud, she immediately encountered a dark cloud of her own. In June 2019, just as Shadow had entered production, original screenwriter Max Landis was accused of sexual and emotional abuse by 8 women. Landis has not directly addressed the claims reported in the Daily Beast. Since secondhand allegations of sexual misconduct had followed Landis on social media since December of 2017, Liang and her producing partners had already distanced themselves from the screenwriter. His original script had also undergone extensive rewrites by Liang herself, resulting in a co-writing credit. Liang's World War II set action thriller, which includes a bit of B-movie charm, follows Maude Garrett, Chloe Grace Moretz, a flight officer who's been tasked with transporting top-secret cargo aboard a B-17 Flying Fortress. The film eventually premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival and the AFI Fest in the fall of 2020, and while it's generally been met with positive reviews, a trend emerged as Liang's contributions to her own film were minimized by those who oppose Landis. Even though Liang's creative voice was present throughout the film, something her 2017 short Do No Harm can attest to, certain critics threw the baby out with the bathwater while insisting that Landis was the film's predominant influence. See, let's just stop right there. What bothers me about this is that here you have an Asian female director who, after making a short film, is now achieving her life's goal, which is to direct an action film. Now, when she was involved, like they said, the film had gone into production. They weren't aware of any problems with whatever was going on in Max Landis's personal life. What that has to do with her and her film and making the film, I don't know. But again, this is another example of how cancel culture is damaging to people that don't deserve it. And I hate this kind of thing. And the people that go after projects like this, shame on them for not doing their work. They have no understanding. They would rather, like, this weird thing about cancel culture is people put themselves on these pedestals that they're the ones that know best for society, that they're the ones that are going to protect others from whatever perceived injustices that have to be, I don't know, delivered, or justice needs to be delivered. Who are they? The rule of law in this country, if there's some kind of abuse allegations or whatever, let the legal system take care of those things. Let the mechanisms that are in place deal with those things. Allegations are not enough. Where's evidence? And what does that have to do with this film anyway? How many films get rewritten? Anyway, let's go on. One of the first reviews to come out about this movie was from the Toronto International Film Festival, and I remember the log line, "A piece of garbage movie by a loathsome creator," Liang tells the Hollywood Reporter. And when I first read this review, I was like, whoa, you don't know me. How am I loathsome? And then I realized that the guy was not talking about me. He was talking about Max Landis. He'd somehow erased me and decided that a writer who wrote an early draft of this project was the creator of this project. Liang completely understands why some people are immediately dismissive of a film with Landis credited due to Writers Guild rules, but on behalf of her actual collaborators, all she's asking for is proper attribution regarding her own movie. I sympathize and I can understand why someone wouldn't want to watch the movie because Max's name is triggering, Liang admits. I made this movie with Chloe Grace Moretz. I made this movie with Kelly McCormack. I made this movie with a number of other female producers and assistants on the directing team. I also made this movie with male producers and assistants on the directing team. If you decide not to watch the movie because of one person, well, you do you. That's fine. But don't tell me that we didn't make this movie, because we did. Her point is well taken. And a lot of people work on films, and yet our culture, people who do these kinds of things, are so quick to, what is it you think you're doing? What is it you think you're doing? By telling others how they should lead their lives, or pillaring the work of literally hundreds of other people because you read an article in the Daily Beast, or maybe you're friends with some of the people that actually suffered Max's alleged abuse. Whatever. But what does it have to do with this movie that all these people worked on? Because its lineage goes back to Max writing the screenplay. He wrote the screenplay, yes. But what is his screenplay about a character in a B-17 bomber and a gremlin on the wings of the plane, like in Heavy Metal? What does it have to do with anything? Honestly, what does it have to do with anything? I mean, does that mean, like, are you now going to, like, any roads that Max Landis has traveled, you're not going to walk down those roads anymore because, oh, he once walked down this sidewalk, so it's been tainted forever? He's not supposed to. I don't know. I really don't understand what is the motivation behind cancel culture. And I'm trying to understand, as Liang is saying here. To illustrate the extent of her rewrites, Liang has revealed that Landis' original script was rather abbreviated due to his tendency to use large-size font. The average feature-length screenplay is around 90 to 120 pages, but Landis' original draft came in at less than 70 pages. The Hollywood Reporter has reached out to Landis. The original script I received, the writer of that script, Landis, sometimes uses large point font. So by the time we removed some of his stylistic flourishes, which included large writing, the script was something horrendous. It was under 70 pages long. It was very short. So that was an issue we had in the beginning. Part of the rewrite process was making sure that we give people their money's worth. That way, they don't go around the cinema and think, I just watched a 55-minute episode of The Twilight Zone. That was a huge fear that was a huge fear that I and the producers had through development. In a recent conversation with the Hollywood Reporter, Liang also discusses the great lengths that Chloe Grace Moretz went to in order to play the flight officer who's trapped in a ball turret for a significant stretch of the film. So it's got a little Amazing Stories in it, it's got a little Twilight Zone in it, it's got a little heavy metal in it. Got it. She also discusses the film's villain, a persistent gremlin, and the real-life inspiration behind it. The Hollywood Reporter asks, I believe you met Shadow in the Cloud producer Kelly McCormack, Atomic Blonde and Deadpool 2, via Do No Harm a few years ago. Did that relationship eventually lead to Shadow coming your way? Yes and no, and that Brian Kavanaugh Jones was the committing producer. So he knows Kelly, and he is also involved with my management company, I believe. So Brian was the person who brought it to me, but then he got Kelly on it. So it's my understanding, Hollywood Reporter again, that to earn a co-writing credit on an original screenplay, a screenwriter has to rewrite at least 50% of the original screenplay. And since you're credited as a co-writer on Shadow in the Cloud, it frustrates me when I see people try and attribute the voice of this movie to someone with whom you never work with in any capacity. Plus, anyone who's seen Do No Harm will instantly be able to recognize that Shadow is your voice. So what would you say to anyone who remains focused on the original screenwriter? Our director says, thank you for saying that, because it frustrates me too. I would want to know a little bit more about why these people are intent on erasing my contribution to this movie and deciding that one person who didn't make the movie did make the movie. And the reasons why people might want to talk about Max Landis are different. For instance, some people might want to talk about Max because they want to talk about sexual assault and rape, which I think they should talk about. If any person wants to boycott the movie because they're triggered, then I support that, quite frankly. I sympathize, and I can understand why someone wouldn't want to watch the movie because Max's name is triggering. One of the first reviews to come out about this movie was from TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, and I remember the log line, a piece of garbage movie by a loathsome creator. He was talking about Max. He somehow erased me and decided that a writer who wrote an early draft of this project was the creator of the project, and I'm not sure what his reasons for doing that might be, but it felt quite like another effort of patriarchy, quite frankly, to erase me from making this movie. Well, I don't agree with that, but I guess I'd say to them, I'm not forcing you to watch the movie. All I can say in my defense is that I made this movie with a team of people who believed in it passionately. I made this movie with Kelly Grace Moretz. I made this movie with Kelly McCormack. I made this movie with a number of other female producers and assistants on the directing team. I made this movie with people of color and women. We made this movie and we worked really hard on it. This movie is the result of our efforts. If you decide not to watch the movie because of one person, you do you, that's fine, but don't tell me that we didn't make this movie because we did. It must have been quite challenging, says the Hollywood Reporter, to endure all this while making and releasing your first American film. Thank you for acknowledging that. I really do appreciate it. I mean, I could be more irritated, but I guess I'm still in grateful mode at this point. I'm just grateful that I got to make this movie. I'm grateful that this movie is able to come out in very trying circumstances around the world right now. I'm grateful to have worked with the people that I did work with, and no one can erase that. So, and then it goes on, and I will put the rest of this interview in the live chat that you can read. So here it is. But what really bothers me about all of this is that so often nowadays, in our cancel culture environment, we have the efforts of so many people who have worked together to create a project, like a movie, and one person's involvement can torpedo the very real work, blood, sweat, and tears that many people put into a film. And I guess I can understand that. But on the other hand, again, I just don't understand the fact that movie making is a very collaborative medium. And when you do have a film like this, here it is. I mean, you've got Roseanne Liang, who is a filmmaker, and this is, I don't know if it's her first feature or not, but she worked with a female star, like she says, a female crew. She had people of color and men working on the movie as well. But this is exactly the kind of movie making that in our time, when you have an Asian female directing a film, isn't this exactly what everyone wants? And yet some outrage now trumps another outrage. I don't get it. And I really don't understand what's the point. What's the point of going after a project like this when, by all accounts, this was exactly the kind of material that people have been clamoring to come out of Hollywood for a long time. For me, I get to see a new voice. I get to see a new female directing voice creating a genre project that is a pastiche of about 3 other different things that I grew up watching. So I'm excited. I like this kind of thing. I want to be a part of this kind of thing. And yet, someone's personal life is going to encroach on the work of all of these people. I don't like that. And as Roseanne said herself, she rewrote the whole thing. And does that mean that it should be, I don't know, wiped from existence? I just don't understand. I don't understand, what is this going to accomplish? And it's bothersome, because I know that, look, having experienced what it's like to go through a mob descending on you, and I did get a little taste of that back in 2020, for basically, by the way, one tweet that was misconstrued and taken out of context, and none of my work. I mean, I'm out here every single day. You want to know where I'm coming from? Well, this is the 590th episode of this show, so you can go back and watch them, and I'm sure there's somebody that says a few of the things I say are problematic. But, I mean, people wanted to take me out and drag me down the street for one tweet that they misconstrued and thought I said something else. And then there's a lot of people that I watched it. They piled on me. There was a lot of people that I work with that said some really awful things about me. Now, I don't mind if people have a bad opinion of me. You want to say awful things about me? You can. But what was disconcerting about what I found out about how some people viewed me is that we all worked together. So apparently I was working with these people that had a less than favorable opinion of me, and I would have spared them the apparently great consternation they felt when I was in their presence. I just wouldn't have worked with them anymore. I don't want to cause anyone discomfort. And it sounds to me like on this particular film project, it all came together well. They made the movie they set out to make. And hearing these kinds of things is, I think to myself, wow, don't people out there have better things to do? Again, this movie should be judged on its own merits. It was made by a certain amount of people. They gave it their all. They did their best. And yet someone comes out and says that somebody who once worked on the project that wasn't even a part of the main production team is how this movie should be judged. This is not the kind of world that we want to live in. It's not the kind of world that's going to help anybody, because one day all of us might find ourselves on the receiving end of some virtual firing line that can actually affect your career. And I think we just need to be ever vigilant. And when I hear that this thing happens to a movie like this, a movie that, well, at least on paper, again, I haven't seen it, is right up my alley. And I would hate to think that there was a world that maybe I would never get to see this movie, because between this and Greenland, these are the 2 movies I'm most looking forward to sitting down and watching on video on demand that I will actually pay money to see. So maybe, Roseanne Liang, I think I'm getting your name right. I hope I am. Man, if you're out there, I'd love to talk to you about this. Maybe come on the show. We'll talk about what it was like to make the movie and all of that, because it sounds good to me. Anyway, again, I can't abide cancel culture. If there's one thing that I would love to see end, or if there's one thing I would like to fight, it is the people that are purveyors of this. Cancel this, cancel that, censor this, censor that. Let's not teach these texts in school. The real question I have is, who the fuck made you the arbiter of these things? Who did? And by the way, why do you possibly believe that you can cast or make judgments about any of this? How have you been given the credentials to do it? I've never met one person, honestly, in my life that has been leading the charge for cancel culture that I liked, to be honest. I'm still waiting. I'm waiting for somebody to show me something that I can respect in them while they're trying to cancel great literature or great movies or whatever it is they want to cancel, or people. I'm still waiting. But I don't think I'm ever going to find that person. Just thinking. I don't think. I mean, I'm not thinking. I am thinking. I just don't know. I don't think it's ever going to happen. But anyway, you know what is going to happen? I'm going to jump into what you guys are saying. But there's so much I can't. I have so many letters to get through. And there's so many people that I haven't heard from or read. And I'm going to. This letter comes from Jason Webster. Hi, Robert. I hope yourself and the fabulous and inclusive members of the Post-Geek Singularity have experienced a wonderful Christmas and are looking forward to a hopefully more positive 2021. This letter continues to look at my favorite action films of all time, so let's settle straight into it. All right. The Man from Nowhere, I have The Man from Nowhere on Blu-ray, is a South Korean film that centers around a manager of a pawn shop who is forced to use his experience as a South Korean Army intelligence officer to protect a little girl named So-mi after her heroin-addicted mother is murdered and her organs are harvested by a brutal local crime syndicate. Directed by Lee Jong-bom, the film moves along at a good, energetic pace, and the cinematography and intense fight sequences are great. However, a major reason for why the film works is at the heart of the story of an unlikely friendship that allows for some truly poignant moments between Won Bin's Cha Se-sik and Kim Sung-ro's Sumi. Distributed by CGA Entertainment, The Man from Nowhere was a commercial success, earning $43 million from a budget of $4 million. The film won numerous awards, including 5 Grand Bell Awards, 7 Korean Film Awards, 3 Blue Dragon Film Awards, and a Baksang Arts Award honor for Best Film. First Blood is the action film that introduced the world to the iconic character of John Rambo, played by 1980s action film heavyweight Sylvester Stallone, and one of my favorites. Directed by Ted Kotcheff, the film is the best of the Rambo franchise because the heart of the story is how a returning Vietnam veteran is treated by a local sheriff and his deputies of a small town in Hope, Washington. Perhaps this was due to the fact that the film was an adaptation of David Morrell's successful 1972 novel First Blood. The narrative was timely as America was still recovering from the fallout of the Vietnam War. The wounds of this war had just begun to heal, and many veterans were dealing with the psychological scars of the war and their initial treatment upon returning home. In light of this, it is the film's story actually gave Stallone a chance to act as much as flex his action muscle and remains one of the best performances of his career. His monologue at the climax when confronted by Troutman while holed up in the sheriff's office is deeply moving. He is assisted by outstanding performances from Brian Dennehy as Sheriff William Teasle and Richard Crenna as Rambo's Special Forces Commander, Colonel Samuel Troutman. The action set pieces are terrific, and the cinematography by director of photography Andrew Laszlo serves the tone of the film wonderfully. Surprisingly, reviews of First Blood were mixed prior to the film's theatrical release. However, positive reviews were given by Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times and the New York Times' Janet Maslin. Ebert remarked how First Blood was a very good movie, well-paced and very well acted, not only by Stallone but also by Crenna and Brian Dennehy. Maslin praised the film's story for its energy and ingenuity, and Stallone's portrayal for making Rambo tormented yet amazingly resourceful as opposed to a straight-out villain. Today, numerous retrospective and contemporary reviews highly praise the film and consider it one of the best films released in 1982. In 2008, Empire magazine selected First Blood in position 253 in its list of the 500 greatest movies of all time. After its theatrical release on the 22nd of October 1982, First Blood became a resounding commercial success, earning $125 million against a budget of $15 million. I got to tell you a story. I've told this story before. I'm going to tell it again. So I used to go to exhibitors screenings in Seattle in a little screening room that was right by the Seattle Post-Intelligencer building. I think it was Seattle PI. Yeah, I think it was Seattle PI. And, or no, it was the Seattle Times. Seattle Times. I can't remember. So the exhibitors in Washington State, we had a blind bidding law. So if you owned a theater chain, you would get to bid on a movie before, like against other exhibitors, but you had to see it first. You wouldn't. There would be no more blind bidding on movies. So what happened was exhibitors would be screening movies sometimes months in advance to see whether they wanted to put it in their theaters. And I wasn't supposed to go, but because of my friend Craig Hyland, I got to go to these screenings. And I knew the exhibitors. It was like the same 8 dudes. But it was cool because you got to meet the reps from the different studios. And First Blood was one of the movies I went to, and they forgot to send the final reel. So the first time that I ever saw First Blood, the last 20 minutes were not there. And it was one of the only times I saw all of the exhibitors actually go, ah, because everybody was so into the movie. It was very exciting. And I love First Blood. That's why I was happy to get that Rambo Steelbook this past year. And what a great experience. And now Jason goes on. John Wick films starring Keanu Reeves have captured the attention and imagination of everyone who loves action films. The films have reignited the actor's career, which is great to see, as he is one of the most likable and genuine gentlemen of Hollywood. John Wick 2 is my favorite of the franchise. The stylish film features atmosphere-inducing cinematography by and slickly edited by Elizabeth Ronalds, as it moves along at a brisk pace. The fight sequences are intense and brutal. However, it is the performances that make John Wick 2 as much as the action. Keanu Reeves is perfect, giving a measured approach to the stoic assassin John Wick, whose actions speak louder and more profoundly than words. He receives solid support across the board, with Larry Fishburne as the underworld crime lord, the Bowery King, Ian McShane reprising his role as Winston, leading the way. And prior to the film's theatrical release on the 10th of February 2017, the response from critics was overwhelmingly positive, with The New Yorker, Screen Rant, and Time Magazine amongst the publications to praise the film. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone labeled John Wick 2 pure cinema. Distributed by Summit Entertainment, John Wick 2 is a commercial success, earning $171.5 million in the U.S. against a budget of $40 million. And then Die Hard, of course, one of the quintessential action films of the 1980s, directed by John McTiernan. It established Bruce Willis as an action film star. However, Alan Rickman stole every scene he was in as the film's antagonist, German terrorist Hans Gruber. The film achieves the right blend of action, suspense, and subtle touches of humor. The film features white-knuckled and suspenseful action sequences and many memorable quotes, such as "Welcome to the party, pal." Surprisingly, the film received mixed reviews from critics, but became a commercial success, earning $141.5 million against a budget of $30 million after its theatrical release on the 15th of June in 1988. I love the first film of the Transporter trilogy, simply known as The Transporter. This is the film that firmly established Jason Statham as the newest action star on the horizon, former British competitive diver who has martial arts experiences, having trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. With his rugged looks, chiseled physique, and ability to carry off the fight sequences with energy and swiftness, it is no wonder he's become a favorite of fans of the action genre. However, there's a coolness and charm to Statham that allows audiences to engage with his character of Frank Martin. The action sequences, such as the opening car chase, are expertly staged and are thrilling, and the fight choreography is of equal quality and filmed so the audience can appreciate all the action in its white-knuckled glory. The infusions of humor are subtle and correctly service the film to provide levity when required and complements the action. All of this provides the opportunity for the film to be an enjoyable thrill ride. The film holds no pretensions to be other than what it is. We all know the story of former British Special Forces officer Frank Martin, who has become a freelance courier of a wealthy and exclusive black market clientele. So, there's the completion of my look at my favorite action films. To yourself and all the groovy members of the Post-Geek Singularity, enjoy the weekend. Sincerely, Jason Webster. Well, Jason, thank you for that. I did edit your letter a little bit. I hope that's okay. But there you go. Thank you for that. Steve Gerard writes in, and Steve Gerard says, Rob, on Robservations Season 2, Episode 587, you held what is your favorite capital starship, the Star Trek The Motion Picture Enterprise refit. With your vast collection, I believe that your favorite transport spaceship is the Eagle from Space 1999. Well, now my question is, what is your favorite one-person or two-person science fiction space fighter? Ooh, thanks. All the best to Elizabeth and you in 2020. 21. Steve Gerard. Steve, my man. I mean, being, as everyone knows, I love spaceships of all kinds, and it's an ongoing debate. I love this the most. As you know, I'm a spaceshipologist, usually every year at the Starship Smackdown. 2020 was the first year since 2002 that we had not done a Starship Smackdown, which was very depressing. But I have an answer for you. Now, there are a lot of runners up, but I'm gonna find the picture. I'm gonna find the picture to show you what my favorite 1 or 2 man, and there are variants of it. So I'm going to show you my favorite 1 or 2 man starfighter of all time, and I think it might not be what you might think it is at first. And I could give you a preamble. I'm trying to find the best picture of it. Let me do that as I'm talking, as I'm using. Now, obviously, you could say that there are many candidates. There is the Star Fury from Babylon 5. Amazing ship. I love the Star Fury. I love it a lot. There are Colonial Vipers from Battlestar Galactica. Another great choice. Similar to the Star Fury in that they work in 3 dimensions. There is, of course, the X-Wing fighter, which is, well, an amazing ship. I love the X-Wing fighters too. But in terms of, you're asking me what my favorite is, and I think people are going to get, as I'm loading these up, people are probably going to find this to be a little bit controversial. But you know what? I'm telling you, and I'm telling you that this is my favorite. I think this is, the design of this I've always loved. I think it is the coolest. It is my favorite one-man fighter in all of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, films, television. Say what you want. And you're going to laugh. You're going to laugh at what it's from, but it is my favorite fighter. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, the Thunder Fighter from Buck Rogers and the 25th Century. Let me just make that a little closer up for you. Now, there it is. That is my favorite one-man fighter, but you actually asked me about one man or 2 men, and what's really interesting is the Thunder Fighter does have a variant. The one that we're looking at right now is the one-man version of it. I love this design. I think it's unique. I think it's badass. It looks mean. And I'll tell you something. To be honest, it vaguely reminds me of one of my favorite unlimited hydroplanes when I was a kid. And it was the first turbine-powered hydroplane. You know what? I should find this. If I can find it. The U-95. I think it was the U-95, right? U-95. And you'll see what I'm talking about. Yep, but that's it. So look at the beautiful lines on this. And I think, this is going to be so, yeah, it is. This is going to be so random. People are going to be like, what are you talking about, Rob? But maybe this'll give you a little bit of understanding into my thinking. So I grew up in Seattle where we had unlimited hydroplanes, right? So now hang on. Here is by the way, the 2-person variant of the Thunder Fighter. Now obviously, this does not turn me on the way the original Thunder Fighter turned me on, to be honest. This is kind of not that great looking. It's a little goofy. It doesn't look nearly as badass as the Thunder Fighter, but the regular Thunder Fighter. But let me show you. So back to the Thunder Fighter. I think part of the reason is because I used to love unlimited hydroplanes growing up, because we had the unlimited hydroplane races, and the first turbine-powered unlimited hydroplane was the U-95. And there was just something about this. I love this. It was like legendary status. So maybe there's some reason that aesthetically I love the Thunder Fighter, but maybe it has something to do with that. I don't know. They're kind of vaguely similar in some way, shape, or form. But there you go. There's a long roundabout way for me to give you an answer, and I want to thank you. I love comments like that. I love these quick letters, and you're asking me geeky questions, and I love it. So there you go. Thanks for that letter. I very much appreciate it. So there you go. Fantastic. And let's see. This next one comes from Russ Whitfield. Hi, Rob, and Happy New Year to all the members of the Post-Geek Singularity. I am a new subscriber to the Burnettwork, but I've been an avid consumer of Nerdrotic, Mr. H, The Drinker, Midnight's Edge for some time now. I found your work via your contributions on their channels, and I have to say I've become a fan of the Burnettwork in short order. I wanted to talk about the fandom menace in general, and more specifically the recent and savage evisceration of Wonder Woman 1984. Listening to your comments on objectively good movies and all the criticism leveled at Wonder Woman 84 by your colleagues, I have to say that the issues raised, by and large, are unarguable. But I think that many are rather missing the point and context in which the movie was made. Wonder Woman 84 seemed to me to be a movie that was intended to be a comic book popcorn flick made and obviously set in the 80s. To extrapolate, if they have made a Wonder Woman movie in 1984 itself, this would have been it. The comics in those days pre-crisis were garish, far-fetched, and extremely campy. Wonder Woman 84 is garish, far-fetched, and extremely campy. It seems to me that Wonder Woman 84 is an 80s comic story come to life, shot, directed, and performed as though it were made at the time. A note also on the people didn't dress like that in the 80s. Well, no, they mostly didn't, but pick up a comic from that era, and you'll see big hair, lots of pink and purple, basically what we saw in the movie. Does any of that excuse the flaws? No, it doesn't. But as Mr. H said, the movie is McDonald's. It's shit. We know it's shit, and every now and again, most people love a Mickey D's. I enjoyed Wonder Woman 84. It's like much of the MCU output. I enjoyed those movies, but I don't think about them, talk about them, or remember much about having consumed them. Which brings me to context. Anyone that knows pop culture knows that Wonder Woman 84 was made during a state of flux at Warner Brothers. The dark and gritty Snyderverse out, the light and fun Aquazam-verse was in. And the DCEU was going to be quietly swept under the rug and forgotten about. Then the Snyder Cut was slated for release and everything changed. In any event, attacking Wonder Woman 84 for being tonally out of whack with the first movie, set in the Snyderverse, is, I think, a little unfair, given the wealth of knowledge the fandom menacers have about the production. Yes, this has been mentioned on a few streams, but it's treated as a side note. But I think this lack of direction and course changing in Warner Brothers AT&T had an effect on the movie, and how could it not? I'm not excusing the movie's flaws, but I think about the vitriolic reactions to it are beyond the pale. For me, this is becoming a theme in the fandom menace, and it's one that I find a little perturbing. There seems a kind of glee seeping into the output, as though we're waiting for the next thing to come out just to tear it to pieces. And we're going to enjoy tearing it to pieces. Look at the hyperbole over the Sun's reports on the issues over the Batman, for instance. It's almost as though the menace at large wants this to be true, and wants the Batman to be a disaster. Now, the party line is, we want it to be good, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like the menace wants things to fail so there can be a stream of I told you so's. It's getting very, very negative, and I hope this isn't a trend that continues. I think the fandom menace has done brilliant work. The Midnight's Edges, the Nerdrotics, the Doomcocks of this world have held the woke feet to the fire and I believe have affected change in some quarters. Looking at you, Mando. But honestly, the constant negativity is becoming a turnoff. The other day I turned into the Inquisition. I heard Gary's opening diatribe about how shit Wonder Woman 84 was and turned it off. This is a first for me as I enjoy the content from Geeks and Gamers, Doomcock, Gary, Tom, etc. But I didn't want to listen to another 4 hours of how shit everything is. However, it's not just the Inquisition. This negativity is creeping into virtually every editorial and every stream. It's almost as if we're becoming what we set out to fight against. The woke crowd froths at the mouth about ists, isms, and phobes everywhere, and now we're finding woke in pretty much anything and everything. We're doing a lot of shrieking and frothing of our own. Now, the counter cry to this is just give us good content. Well, I'm beginning to fear that whatever content comes out, it's not going to be good enough. To circle back to Wonder Woman 84, I'd have liked for the analysis to be a bit more in-depth, the content taken more into consideration, for pop culture experts to realize that the garish OTT style was entirely in keeping with the comics and films of the time, and sure, then point out all the other stuff. No one should ask anyone to compromise their journalistic integrity, but for me, it seems less about journalistic integrity and more like the Menace now has its own "we hate everything" agenda. I'm sorry for my first correspondence to be so negative. I'm complaining about negativity, so I'm not blind to the irony here. So I need to clarify, I've loved listening to the streams and editorials. All of you have produced such brilliant, brilliant content for so long. I'm a fan. You guys do wonderful work, and I will, of course, continue to listen and support. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this missive if you have time. In any event, my thanks to you and all of your peers for keeping the streams going, especially over Christmas, to keep those people who were in enforced isolation company 24/7. That was a wonderful gesture and incredibly thoughtful. Anyway, here's to 2021 and hoping some genre content that we can all love. All the best, Russ. Well, Russ, first of all, great letter. I want to thank you for writing this letter in. Now, I am not a part of the fandom menace. I don't recognize being a part of the fandom menace, but I collaborate with a lot of people that do call themselves members of the fandom menace, and I like them very much. I have to say that I have not had one negative experience collaborating with anybody on YouTube so far. Since I've had my own, I should clarify, on my own channel. It's interesting, people I was collaborating, the only negative experience I ever had in social media all came from one area, which is interesting. I find that fascinating, and I don't know why that is. I guess it's because the people that are part of these other channels, we watch each other. So it's interesting that to watch my show is to get to know me far more than if you're just working with me and see me once every couple weeks for a couple hours, do a bit and leave, which is sort of interesting. I think you're right. I think there is an idea that sometimes negativity sells, and certainly it does sell. A lot of people said they watch my channel because I'm positive about everything, with one exception. But I mean, I know what it's like to live in a world where we had none of this. We had none of this stuff. Growing up, I longed to live in the world that we live in now. And I have said many times on this channel, we are surrounded by amazing things. You know, you might not have liked, say, The Boys Season 2 as much as Season 1, but the fact that we're getting a Boys television series at all, based on the comic, obviously, that goes as far as it does, to me, is amazing. And for the most part, I think The Boys does a pretty good job. I mean, obviously, they got the second season out fairly quickly because they were surprised, I think, by the enormous hit the first season became. How it did become a genre water cooler moment. And I look around and I think about some of the amazing things. The Queen's Gambit, an adaptation of Walter Tevis's novel. That was amazing. And for the most part, I think 90% of what we're getting is pretty amazing. There's some really amazing stuff. Certainly in the area of whether it's comic book, graphic novel. I mean, just this week, Marvel's releasing both a New Mutants and a Moon Knight omnibus. They'd recently released an Eternals omnibus. There's so much great stuff that is being celebrated in so many different quarters. I mean, a lot of people might not be excited, but I have this German media book, Paul Verhoeven's Showgirls. I have Showgirls in 4K, and it comes with the documentary You Don't Know Me. And I am very excited to have this. Because, I'm a Paul Verhoeven fan, but it's fun to just have. I mean, the fact that we're now getting so much great stuff, the work that all the different boutique home video companies are doing to bring us cult titles, and Vinegar Syndrome brought us Don Coscarelli's Beastmaster in a beautiful, beautiful special edition. I mean, we are living in a world where there is so much. If you're a fan of this material, you can get so much great stuff. But I think the negativity, I can only speak for myself. I guess I don't have the vehement reaction to Star Wars. I mean, I understand where Star Wars was, where it was going when they picked it up. I kind of know from an industry perspective why the Skywalker sequel trilogy turned out the way it turned out. And to me, my disappointment in Star Trek began in 1983 with Return of the Jedi. So, but I do understand that these longtime franchises that people have loved, whether it's Doctor Who, whether it's Star Trek, whether it's Star Wars, these are all franchises that have existed in a continuum for a long time. And there's a lot of good in those franchises. And what happens, I think what is baffling and maddening to people is when they see creators who are delivering, they should have all the resources in the world, and what they're delivering should be great, and it isn't. And then those creators are telling you what you should and shouldn't like, or how these things should be. I think that it's, I can see how it's all bubbling up, and a lot of it is reactions to certain things. I mean, look, as much as I guess I have a love-hate relationship with the Watchmen series, I liked a lot of it, but I found it shocking how much of an agenda it had in it and how muddled its political message was at the end. I mean, Watchmen was a show that was all about political agendas. And look, you can say that the original Watchmen was all about that as well, but there's a lot of, Alan Moore was drawing on a bunch of different things. Whereas I felt that the Watchmen television show, as much as I thought one of the great episodes of TV maybe ever was in the show, I did find its political messaging sometimes to be very overbearing. And I understand what they're trying to do, but just tell me a story first and make it a good one. And I think when we're being bombarded with less stories that are less than great, and one is coming right after another, I get what you were saying with Wonder Woman 84. I totally get it. But, you know, if you go back and you look at some of the movies from the 80s, you know, you go back, even if you were saying that, okay, Wonder Woman 84, let's go back to movies of 1984. I mean, I can think of many off the top of my head, like Ghostbusters and things like that. So, okay, movies that came out in 1984. The Karate Kid. Once Upon a Time in America. Romancing the Stone. Starman. Top Secret. Red Dawn. Against All Odds. The Never-Ending Story. Top Secret. There's a good one. Amadeus. The Terminator. Paris, Texas. 16 Candles. Footloose. Splash. Purple Rain. Beverly Hills Cop. Stop Making Sense in Beat Street. A Nightmare on Elm Street. Streets of Fire. Hell, Supergirl. Repo Man, another favorite of mine. Spinal Tap. The Natural. The Bounty. Blame It on Rio. See, the thing is, those movies, while a product of their time, were not necessarily overtly, well, campy. They were trying to exist within their own continuity. And when you're making a movie set in 1984 and it becomes sort of a reflection of a reflection, I think you're sort of losing something. Like I would have been more interested in seeing a movie that is not trying to pay some kind of lip service to the pop culture movies that we were watching. I think one of the things about living in 1984 that was so interesting is, if you want to go back to our pop culture, you had all kinds of things converging. You had music, fashion, movies, all the pop culture all fed off of itself. It was a very interesting time in for all of pop culture, really. And also you had really interesting things happening politically and socially and all of that. And it seemed to me that Wonder Woman 84, I figured it would have, and the overall idea of George Orwell's 1984, not, and someone said to me, well, George, it wasn't written in 84. Yes, but it was about 1984. And having lived through 1984, it was a big deal. It's sort of the idea of, are we going into this Orwellian future with computer technology? The Mac was going to get released. I mean, there was all kinds of craziness that was happening in 1984. And I felt that what Wonder Woman did with 1984 was really unfortunate. It was lackluster. It didn't make much sense to me. But the thing that really bothered me about 1984 is 1984 is, Wonder Woman 84. Wonder Woman is a totally, fantastical character in the sense that her father is Zeus, one of the Greek gods. And to establish her in a universe where she exists, and you see the Amazons, and the first movie does such a wonderful job of making that believable. And by having Wonder Woman, this high fantasy character, go to World War I and participate and see the horrors of man's world, you make this fantasy character really, really believable, and you are telling a story that can resonate with people. But Wonder Woman 84 goes the entire other direction, where it doubles down on the fantasy. And to me, the ask in that movie is Wonder Woman herself. If you believe a man can fly, you'll believe Wonder Woman's the daughter of Zeus and is from Paradise Island, Themyscira. You're going to believe that. Well, when you have a plot about that character that's about making wishes, all of that, you've doubled down on the fantasy aspects of it, and then there's no more reality to buy into. Once you've done that, your credibility goes out the window, because the idea of how wishes work and how, even the idea of Cheetah became an apex predator. I want to be an apex predator. Did she really mean that she wanted to be a jungle cat? There was so many weird things that happened that was in the entire opposite direction. And I think that's one of the great things about superheroes. When you're making fantasy or cinema, you get a big ask. Science fiction, fantasy, and horror, your main premise is usually your ask. Like, I'll believe in a werewolf. Okay, werewolves exist in this world. Make me believe. I'll believe that a werewolf exists, but now you've got to make me believe, how does it exist in our world? And that's the thing, is that the world that you show people in a fantasy film, whether it's science fiction, fantasy, and horror, for instance, when you go to the Shire in the Lord of the Rings movies, the physical world still exists. There's gravity. There are plants growing. Most of the world is recognizable. So you're like, okay. And then hobbits are not magic wielders. Gandalf is one wizard, and he brings with him magic. Okay, I believe these things. Then there's, an invisible ring. But for the most part, Middle-earth begins as a place that is grounded in some kind of physical reality, and then you can have this other stuff seep in. If too much of it seeps in, then you don't believe it anymore. I think the problem with Wonder Woman is it created this really believable Diana Prince character that Gal Gadot's playing, and you believe her. You believed her in Batman v Superman. You believed her in Wonder Woman. You believe this character because the world that she inhabited made you believe in her. You could suspend your disbelief. Wonder Woman 84 spins that off into oblivion. There's nothing to believe in. Once you're talking about making magic wishes, then the questions about, well, how are these wishes governed? Who makes the decision? And here's the thing that I think it's also why I had a big problem with Tenet, which we're going to review on Elizaviews. So the idea of say, inversion, I'll give you how I'm thinking. So we see people who are inverted moving back through time in Tenet. Are they thinking backwards? Because is your brain, are you processing information in reverse? Are you seeing backwards? Are images the same way that a bullet jumps back into the gun? Are the light waves, the light rays that you're seeing as you're moving back through time, are they coming out of your eyes? Are they jumping? if you run down the explanation of inversion in Tenet, for me, it starts to fall apart. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I had a real problem when I was watching Tenet going, I don't buy your premise. I didn't buy their premise in the trailers. I mean, I understood what they were trying to do. And I'm like, you're not on a tape that's running backwards and forwards. It's not like you're in Tenet's universe, everything is immutable. It's a fixed thing. So you can actually go back and forth through time. But even if you're moving through time backward and someone's moving forward, how do you interact with that person? I start having questions. In Wonder Woman 84, part of the reason I think people like myself and others were disappointed is that the idea of making a magic wish, it's just too far. You've gone too far. You've taken your fantasy premise and you've blown it up. And I think the same is true of Star Trek Discovery. We'll buy into the Star Trek universe, but when you have a character that suddenly is at the center of every story and she's literally infallible, pretty much. She saves the universe from just about everything. You're watching this and you're like, look, I've watched a lot of science fiction television my whole life. I've watched a lot of science fiction movies. I've read a lot of science fiction books. And the character and the interplay that's being depicted in Star Trek Discovery is not good. It is not good. It's odd and weird and skewed. It doesn't follow any storytelling logic that I've experienced. So you reject it. Doctor Who, when they go back and they try and change the origin of Doctor Who and say something totally different from established lore, the people that have loved the Doctor Who universe and have grown up with the Doctor Who universe and studied it, followed it, it's part of their head canon or whatever. When you then turn around and you say, well, what you thought for the last 50 years isn't the case. What it looks like is the creators that are currently working on the show are putting themselves above the show that they're working on. And I feel that's happening with a lot of our franchises. And that's why people get angry, is that these are paradigms they were working already. And yet now people, it's like cancel culture. We're going to go back and we're going to get rid of Odysseus. We're going to get rid of the Odyssey and the Iliad simply because, gosh, something that was written 2,000 years ago doesn't conform to our way of life now. Gosh, a franchise that was created in 1977, let's change it and update it and make it more palatable for these audiences. Yeah, but what about how the franchise has already existed? We'll change it. And I think that's what's really problematic. For me, Wonder Woman 84 failed to my disbelief was not suspended. Simple as that. And I think when people are passionate about these things, the question is, well, why? Why have you allowed this to happen to our beloved franchises? Why are you trying to change something that, by the way, wasn't asking for change, and it really wasn't necessarily broken? And all we want is great storytelling. And it seems like there's so much of our world now that is letting us down in various ways. And I feel like and another thing, these corporately minded, I mean, remember, if you grew up reading comic books, basically you have a writer and an artist, maybe there's an art team, a writer and artist, and the editor of the comic. It's a small group of people defining where that comic is going. And all of our definitive runs on comic books are usually, like, I love New Teen Titans. I love what George Perez is drawing and Marv Wolfman's writing. When I started reading Titans, that synergy, what they were doing, maybe Terry Austin inks or something, but what was going on in that comic was a voice, the authorship, the synergy between Perez and Wolfman. It was their work that I loved. And when you saw Star Trek, for instance, it was, sure, someone had to pay for it, but really the writers on the show were forging their own, they were doing their own thing. And you had it overseen. George Lucas, whether you like the prequel trilogy or not, it's uncut George Lucas. And the original trilogy he began. So it's like, we're getting real authorship. And then what happens is we have all these other creators that come in and they decide, well, I'm going to put my imprimatur on this. So their desires, and we're seeing it in the finished product. You know, the Star Trek universe was established. There's a certain design aesthetic, there's certain colors they use and all that. That was what Star Trek was. And now, since 2009, we've had people come in and go, nah, let's change it. And that, frankly, is, as somebody who's been following this stuff for a long time, it gets to the point where you're like, well, who are you? Like, to change it. Like, I've been following this thing since I was a little kid, and you've come in and now you've changed it. And the question is, well, why? Why do this? I mean, the fictional universes that endure are those that have these universes that you can believe in. Now, there are others, not many people are aware, but the Gundam universe, the animated Gundam series, has their Universal Century continuity, which you can follow. And there's characters that come back and they work within that continuity. But then they'll go do, say, Wing Gundam, which isn't a part of the Universal Century continuity. It's the Gundam concept, but done differently. Or Gundam Seed, or Turn A Gundam, although there's a convergence anyway. But I've talked about that before. But in these, look, if Star Trek Discovery just came right out and said, you know what, this is a new continuity, we're rebooting the universe, I would be like, great, fine. And I would judge it on its own merits. But when I'm looking at this, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They've changed everything. There's been no effort on the part of those showrunners to make the show fit in the previously existing continuity. And as a viewer like myself, I'm like, yeah, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And with Wonder Woman 84, once you've seen the first Wonder Woman, it was really interesting how they used Wonder Woman, a fantasy character, and put her in a very decidedly non-fantastical situation. And that became really compelling. Wonder Woman's relationship with Steve Trevor and his merry band of brothers, and how that all worked was the heart and soul of that movie. And when you watch Wonder Woman 84, everybody's a weird caricature, and there's nothing to ground that movie in real life. Nothing. You know, people are body swapped. There's all this stuff, like, you have to ask yourself, where'd that poor guy go when Steve Trevor inhabited his body? You know, there's a lot of people that say, oh, Rob, there's a rape going on. Like, no, it's not. This is not what was the thing that you should be mad about. Is this wish supplanted someone's personality with the personality of another person. Now, Wonder Woman wasn't expecting that to happen, nor did she even know that was possible. So, but once she realizes it's Steve Trevor, it is consensual, because the other dude whose body is been usurped is somewhere else. And where is that person? Another thing is that when you've made wishes, and like that guy that Steve Trevor replaced, where did his essence go? Obviously, it came back from somewhere. And then you have a logistical question, like, okay, so these walls that are made in the Middle East, there's mass and physics involved with those walls being built. How does that work? You know, and there are questions when you make that kind of a wish. When you're wishing in a story, and it doesn't matter, you don't need those questions answered. But in the real world, you do. Like, if you're going to build a 1,000-foot wall around a country, okay, well, that's a real thing now, and you're now dealing with the physical world. How is that supported? How deep do those walls go into the ground? What if there's an earthquake? Will they fall over? I mean, these are things that weren't, it's just, they're just wishes. And when you're watching a movie like Wonder Woman, you're already believing in the daughter of Zeus. So you've got to make the rest of the movie more believable. Wonder Woman 84, to me, was gobbledygook, because all of it, I didn't believe for a minute. And that was problematic. And do I get angry like the Fandom Menace? Not as angry, unless you're talking about Star Trek Discovery. But I do think that there's a point there. And when you keep getting served up stuff that is disappointing, I can see, because we're the ones that are paying for it. We're always the ones on the front line seeing it first. And if it sucks, man, that can be annoying. First of all, let me see what you guys are saying. This is a really interesting letter that I want to read. But what are you guys saying now? Oops. Hang on. I believe that I accidentally blasted this away. So let's get back to where I was. Um, mm, mm, mm. So, yes, it was Willow. Willow sent in a super chat. Willow said, I just watched For the Uniform, the DS9 episode, and Cisco used weapons of mass destruction against an entire planet containing thousands of civilians without authorization from Starfleet, all to capture one terrorist. I'm pretty sure that's a crime against humanity. It very well might be a crime against humanity, Willow. I haven't seen that episode in quite some time, so I'd have to go back and look, but I wouldn't doubt it. But yeah, and that shouldn't have happened because our Maquis friends could have prevented that from happening. But I think that, yeah, you're probably not wrong about that at all. Emil Johansson says, it's weird how people can do good stuff but also seem like bad people or even be bad people. Like if someone likes Michael Jackson, I'm going to tell them he wasn't good, but I'm not going to say he did bad music. Well, I think it's really interesting. I mean, obviously people are people's lives are compartmentalized, and the bad things that people do, the way human beings treat one another, might not even ever manifest in work. I mean, when I'm working on something, when I'm editing, for instance, I'm not the same person I am when I'm not working. My entire focus is different. I would say that when I'm working, my entire personality is indeed different because I'm in work mode. And yet when I'm having a conversation with somebody and trying to get a point across, or I'm listening to them get a point across to me, I'm not even working at all. So that doesn't even come into play. I'm the way I am outside of work. So I've always thought that people are compartmentalized and they have different sides of themselves that they show to different people. And they're all part of the same thing that make up that person. But to me, I just kind of understand that I don't think that Michael Jackson performing music or singing really had much to do with, let's just say, other parts of his life, other needs, other things that he was thinking about. And I think that that's something we as human beings need to understand. Like when I'm working on a movie, I'm not thinking about anything other than, say, the scene I'm cutting, or it has nothing to do with what I lust after as a man, or what kind of food I want to eat, really. My work is, it's all intertwined, of course, but people are compartmentalized. Emil goes on to say, I came up with a dilemma. If Stalin had invented, like, the iPhone, would it still have been a good invention? Could people in good conscience use it? Or would they like some other invention? I think that's a really good point. If someone like Stalin did invent the iPhone, does that make the iPhone bad? Do you not use the iPhone because Stalin killed millions and millions of his own people, or had his millions of his own people killed? A very good question. See, I would say that the iPhone exists unto itself. We still drive Mercedes in the United States, despite what the company was doing during World War II. So it's interesting. And I think that's a really good question to be asking. Mark C is here. Interesting. And I don't know by the way, I don't know if I have an answer. If Stalin invented an iPhone, my thoughts would be like, well, the iPhone didn't kill anybody, and the iPhone didn't ask to be invented. Certainly not by a mass murderer. So is it the iPhone's fault? And my answer to that would be, well, the iPhone is here and it works, so why not make use of it? Are we not going to make use of technology because of the origins? I look at it this way, go back far enough in time, every person's awful. In some way, shape, or form, there's been, and I don't mean every single individual person is awful, but I mean people are awful throughout history. And yet their awfulness has borne beneficial fruit. But it's a tough one. Mark C says, interesting bit on First Blood. After the makeup department made up his gashed arm, Stallone decided to go to the ER to ask for an aspirin. Troutman was originally to be played by Kirk Douglas. That's interesting. He went to the ER to ask for an. I didn't know that. Trautman was going to be played by Kirk Douglas. I have heard that before. I think that might have been overshadowing it. I liked the fact that Richard Crenna played him. I thought it was good. Anonymous said, "Hi, Rob. I have to tell you I saw a few pictures of you in your younger days on your Instagram, and I can't help but think you look a little bit like a young River Phoenix, especially your very similar haircut to his. Do you agree or disagree?" A lot of people used to tell me that I look like River Phoenix in my younger, prettier days. I was very thin growing up. Yes, so I heard that a lot. I don't know. I mean, I think so. I think there were times when I did more than because of my hair. So yeah. Yeah. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but people have told me that. I thought River Phoenix was a very handsome man. I'm proud to be even spoken of in the same sentence as him. So yes, I think it's a good thing. Emil Johansson says, "My opinion, the people at Lucasfilm messed up, but it doesn't justify hatred. If people calm down, maybe the criticism would be taken more seriously." Look, I agree, but it's hard. Like, even I think, you know what it is? And I'll tell you something. I do sometimes feel that these things that I love, that now that we live in the post-Geek Singularity and everything has gone mainstream, that you have people that wouldn't have touched these projects before. Now, because they're successful, you get, I guess the analogy would be like, yeah, the cool kids are coming and playing with all your toys, but they're not playing with your toys correctly. And you have to stand by and watch your toys that you've loved your whole life be played with wrong, if that makes any sense. And you ask, you're like, well, why are you not playing with toys correctly? You know, why are you doing this? Don't you understand? Like, you know, when you watch The Rise of Skywalker and there's a ship that's been sitting in a desert on a hill where scavengers are for, decades, and they are able to go avail themselves of this, you're thinking to yourself, well, why would somebody write something that dumb? Like, any astute viewer is like, and when you watch something, I think why the real hatred happens, at least for me, is it's not just one decision that's being made that's bad. It's collective awfulness. It's one bad decision after another bad decision after another bad decision after another bad decision, and it's just collective idiocy that you're watching, and especially in terms of storytelling. You're watching this stuff going, wait a minute, did you stop and run the logic of this one down? Like, did you think about it? Because if I'm thinking about the logic in your story that doesn't work more than you thought about it, it's insulting to think that somebody is serving up a dish where they haven't taken into consideration, they haven't even stopped to think about the obvious ramifications of what you're watching. And I think part of the anger comes with some of these things make it seem like we, the viewers, are fucking dumb. And that's what I don't like. I don't like when we're like, people are like, you people are idiots. I can tell you anything. Like, for instance, one of the things I hate, easy thing to define, light speed skipping. Light speed skipping. Now, I understand what light speed skipping is supposed to be. But in the Star Wars universe, it is established in Star Wars how you have a navigational computer and you have to calculate traveling through light speed because you don't want to bounce too close to a supernova. That'd end your trip real quick, wouldn't it? So going through light speed, there is no light speed skipping. You can't do that. As a matter of fact, you can't use light speed around planets either, because the way it works, you've got to be in outer space in a vacuum. You can't. And so when you're watching light speed skipping, and you have Han Solo's voice from Star Wars where they establish you need a navicomputer, you have to have the right coordinates to go through hyperspace. And what's interesting is that has a basis in scientific fact. Well, when they just toss that shit out in the Star Wars universe, it's like, wait a minute, bruh. You can't light speed. You don't appear out of hyperspace in the middle of a city. And when you watch, I know this is a little thing, but when it happens, I think to myself, well, you clearly haven't paid attention to how light speed works. And then when people go, well, Rob, light speed doesn't have, it can work, it's imaginary, so it can. No, but the concept isn't imaginary. And the concept was already established as part of the rules of the universe. When you're traveling through light speed, it ain't like dust and crops, boy. There is no light speed skipping. You don't skip through just like any aircraft. Can you imagine? Like, if you start thinking about it, let's say you're blind. You're in an aircraft and you have to close your eyes and just dream of where you're going to pop up because you just don't know. That's like what light speed skipping is. You're like going to fly into the middle of a city and open your eyes instantly and hope you don't hit anything. I mean, when I see stuff like this, sure, the idea of light speed skipping might sound cool. Like, yeah, man, this is going to be a cool visual. But you're like, okay, it might look cool. It makes no fucking sense in this universe that you're in. And when you have people like J.J. Abrams and the way that they're writing, they just compound one of these things after another. I don't care how good a pilot Rey is. I do not believe that Rey could pilot the Millennium Falcon through the wreckage of that Star Destroyer the way she does in The Force Awakens. I am sorry. You have completely shattered my belief in your story by having someone who's never been behind. Look, I'm a pretty good driver. I haven't driven an 18-wheeler, but I've driven big trucks and small cars. I also know that when I get behind the wheel of anything for the first time, even if it's a simple car, there is a learning curve. You have to learn what it is you're driving. And I'm asked to believe that Rey in The Force Awakens can get behind the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon and fly it the way that the most expert pilot in the world couldn't do. And to me, I'm like, I don't believe that. You've shown me something. You've gone too far. You've gone too far. And that's just one of 100 things that I don't believe. And it's not because Rey's a girl. It's because as a character, they've established her as, I mean, if she could fly like that, why wouldn't she be in the employ of somebody? Why wouldn't she go to Plunkett, whatever his name is, and say, can I have a job flying? Like, why is she being why is she waiting for her parents to come back? She has no evidence that they're going to come back. So, like a movie like The Force Awakens just compounds one stupid idea after another, and that's what we're getting. And I think that it gets hard when you're supposed to be, accept this, like, okay, I'll listen to this criticism, when it feels like you as an audience member, you're paying your money to be served up things that are stupid, and you're asking yourself, why are you selling me something that is absurd? Why am I spending my money to buy shit from you that's dumb? And I think that's why people get mad. Chloe says, hey Rob, seeing how Stephanie Meyers did not use traditional lore for her vampires, I wonder if she got the backdrop for them from the Watchers in the Book of Enoch. Watchers being fallen angels, which the people would refer to them as the shiny people. Oh, well, obviously she's a religious woman, so I could see that could absolutely be happening. But I think that's what great authors do. Not to say that Stephanie Meyer's maybe not necessarily the best author in the world, but I would say that there's something in Stephanie Meyer's work, especially in the Twilight books, that captured the imagination of a lot of people. I have a theory about it. I mean, as far as, let's say, teenage girls, before teenage girls come into their own, they can have a really beautiful boy that they can be in love with that doesn't want to get into their pants. And that's something I think that when they're on the cusp of young adulthood, that can be appealing. But I think that you got to give her credit for coming up with that. And I think it absolutely could have been, that would have been one of her influences. I totally believe in that. Timbula the Spider Monkey. On the single-seater starfighter question, if you had to choose, which would it be, a Colonial Viper, an X-Wing, or a Cosmo Zero? Those are my top three. I will take the Zero. Yes, I will. That would be from, and especially if it's, WildStar's Kodai's Cosmo Zero. Hell yeah. But you know what? Some people would tell you that the Cosmo Zero isn't real because it's animated. Although they did have it in the live-action movie. Joseph said, hey, Rob, I have serious issues with one of your mods, Joshua Levesque. The kid has constantly abused his mod powers on me, and this time he crossed the line. He's constantly blocked me in chat for no reason, insulted, threatened, and accused me in the Twitter DMs. He has been, well, why don't we take this one off? Why don't we take this one off? Take this one offline. How about that? And we'll talk about that. So yes, but I think Josh does a good job, and let's why don't we deal with that in a different way? But Joseph, you're just so you know, you are a valued member of this community, and you have been. And by the way, you did draw me a great picture of me in a Starfleet uniform. So let's talk about that. Purple Valkyrie became a member. Well, thank you, moderator Valkyrie. Lawrence Tan became a member, and Raygun Media became a member. Jason, Mr. Spriggs, and he does our great graphics for Let's Get Physical Media. Philip Moore became a member. John became a member. Tim Bula goes on to say, on New Year's Eve in Australia, one of our major TV networks played The Last Waltz at midnight. That is movie Martin Scorsese edited some of that, right? That's the band. That's the Last Waltz is about them. It's great. That's a great movie. It was one of the first concerts I ever saw on pre-recorded video cassette, to be honest. It's still my favorite concert film of all time. What's yours? I've still got The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down running through my head 4 days later. I have to say probably my favorite concert film. I really like Stop Making Sense. Because it's so stripped down and bare bones. Probably Stop Making Sense, I think. Stubble McShave is here. Stubble says, it's nice to see that Wonder Woman takes after her father. I've read quite a bit of Greek mythology. Zeus bribed, tricked, or used magic on a lot of people in order to have sex with them. Well, yep, there is that. Brandon Sheehy says, do you prefer Hellraiser 1 or 2? The first one is a wonderful example of low-budget, imaginative filmmaking, is more tense and rewatchable, but the second one is full of excess gore and wackiness and just so much fun. Cenobite design is dope as fuck in both of them. I like both Hellraiser 1 and 2. I mean, I love Hellraiser 1 because even though it's got wacky supernatural shenanigans and the Cenobites and Frank Cotton coming back from the dead and the lament configuration, it's still about, very human concerns. It's still about a fucked up family, ultimately. Frank Cotton, the Cotton family, those two brothers, man, and Julia and their daughter. I mean, it's about a family, whereas Dr. Chenard in Hellraiser 2 and Leviathan and literally the depiction of hell, it's much more of a dark fantasy movie. I think it's pretty interesting. I love them both for different reasons, but they are a lot of fun, very imaginative. Redford Reddington. I love James Spader. Isn't part of the problem that people need to suspend their disbelief and that they need unrealistic things to be portrayed realistically? Hard for a director to trust the audience when some have a short attention span. But see, suspension of disbelief is earned. And I think in my mind, my own theory from that is we all live in the real world. And so all of our experience in terms of suspending our disbelief comes out of our experience of the real world. So, like for instance, we have nothing to judge magic by. But if magic becomes, say, too big, like if you use magic to create a 1,000-foot wall around an entire country, well, that seems a little excessive. Like, I can't believe that. But if somebody uses a magical spell to create, say, an energy field around someone where they can't use their own magic against me, I mean, I've always believed that old Arthur C. Clarke adage that sufficiently advanced technology would appear as magic to people, to primitive people. I've always believed that in some way, shape, or form that magic as wielded has there is some kind of natural, like if you were to break it down, and if you lived in Middle Earth, for instance, that there's magic that you could chart, like you could actually figure out. There's physics behind magic. We just don't understand it now, but there would be eventually, that you would know how to manipulate certain things as a magician that you wouldn't normally. Like, remember, Gandalf, he's not human. Gandalf is one of the Astari, like Sauron. So these creatures are not quite grounded, and so I can believe that they wield these powers, but the powers, they still have to be governed by something. So in order, if somebody just is magic and they could just do whatever they want, like for instance, Q borders on, like if he's gonna snap his fingers and send the Enterprise out to where the Borg territory is, I can that's strange credulity for me, but I'll buy it. But if you were to say that there was Q, if Q just created an entire galaxy, I don't think that would go too far. I don't think they would show that, but it goes too far. So I think that the suspension of disbelief within science fiction, fantasy, and horror context is really important. Perhaps the most important thing to get your audience to believe that. So, yeah. Bob Quall says, watching Tenet, I was thinking of 1969's Journey to the Far Side of the Sun with the invaders Roy Finnis, produced by Jerry Anderson, a cousin in premise to Tenet with similar issues. Yes. For those of you who don't know, Journey to the Far Side of the Sun is I love it, is a cool 1969 science fiction film that was produced by Jerry Anderson of Thunderbirds and UFO and Space 1999 fame, Captain Scarlet fame. It's a feature film, and it's basically about, there's an Earth, a mirror Earth. There's an Earth that's in the same orbit as us that is directly across from the sun, from us. And it's about, the movie was also called Doppelganger when it first came out, a double. But we don't understand what doppelganger means here. Although they did make a Drew Barrymore movie, I think, called Doppelganger. An Israeli director directed that. But it's a very interesting movie. But yes, you're right, Bob. It has very similar issues to Tenet. Like, I think watching Tenet, it's a gorgeous movie. But I have real problems. I'm still grappling with whether or not I was disappointed in that. The one thing that I was worried about when I went in and saw the film, when I was just looking at trailers, when I finally saw the movie, I'm like, I don't believe the way they're depicting going backward through time. I don't believe it. It doesn't make sense to me, because that idea is that time is running on this, you're on a loop, you're on a track, and I don't believe that. And if you are doing that, if you're then are you also thinking backwards? And if you're thinking backwards, then how? Like, you've got people, again, I have a problem. I can't, the way inversion is depicted in Tenet, I didn't believe, and I've never felt that before. I was watching this movie, I'm trying to buy into it. It's beautiful looking, it's well made, I liked all the acting, it was so much fun, but I just didn't buy their concept of inversion. I didn't buy it. But I don't think it has to do necessarily with attention span, like Reddington was saying. Stubble McShave says, okay, so let's say that the fighter jet Wonder Woman uses is some kind of special airplane that has extra large fuel tanks or very good fuel economy, and they reach their destination. But did they have to go back all the way as well? Did they pull up to a gas station? Again, I find that all unbelievable. As Claude would tell you, they needed to refuel that plane. That plane could not make it all the way to Cairo or whatever. They couldn't have made the crossing they made in that plane. So you're like, if you know that, you're like, well, wait a minute. I didn't believe that even though the Air and Space Museum, you can go out on the tarmac at Dulles Airport. I'm like, they don't leave fighter jets fueled up and just sitting on the tarmac waiting for someone to come use them. Anyway, Trav Hall sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob. I watched A Good Woman is Hard to Find, one of my good surprises of 2020, last night on your recommendation, and I loved it. Films where our hero is forced to pull from their darkest nature fascinates me. I could trust our friar of fantastical philosophy. I'm a friar now. I love that. Devin Hilton sends in a super chat and says, do you think Gardner Fox get the respect he deserves now? When people think of comics, they think of Lee, Kirby, Kane, Finger. Gardner Fox is rarely mentioned. I talked with Jim Stranko about this in depth once. No, I don't think he gets nearly his due. And you know what? Yeah, let's talk about what Gardner Fox actually created. So Gardner Fox, he was he created numerous comic book characters for DC. But let's see, I'm just running here. So he co-created The Flash, Hawkman, Dr. Fate, Zatanna, the original Sandman, and they became the Justice Society. He also introduced the concept of the multiverse to DC Comics in the story The Flash of Two Worlds. So, no, I think you're absolutely right. Now, he worked on, what did he do in the Silver Age? He revived the concept of the Justice League of America. He turned the Justice Society into the Justice League. Yeah, Gardner Fox does deserve more respect. 100%. 100%. I totally, but it's the comic world is so weird, and who gets credit and who doesn't. Alexander Wilson, it's like everything, culture of celebrity. I love Stan Lee. I've been on shows with Stan Lee. I met Stan Lee, but Stan Lee, he's still around. He's the voice of Marvel. Well, he's not still around now, but he was around for a long time. And with the explosion of the MCU and the proliferation of comics in the 80s, I mean, Stan Lee became this revered figure that the world at large knew. I mean, if comics had never exploded the way they exploded, people would have known Stan Lee, but they wouldn't have remembered him. But over the last 30 years, Stan Lee became this amazing figure and figurehead to the comic book industry. Maybe he gets given a little bit too much credit, but if I were to ask my mom who Stan Lee was, my mom would know, but my mom would not know that Gardner Fox created the idea or turned the idea of the Justice Society of America into the Justice League. My mom would go, I love the Justice League. Well, he was an important man then, so my mom would know, but I'd have to tell her. Alexander Wilson said, I was listening to Scott Galloway, and he said, the algorithm on social media and YouTube is programmed to pick up negativity. It's a lot easier for negative materials to go scale. He said this is the reason why negativity is king. I don't know. That I could see that being true. But I just don't like... I mean, my problem is I'm inherently not necessarily, unless we're talking about Star Trek Discovery, I'm not an inherently negative guy because I like too much stuff. There's too much cool shit all around. I mean, you could sit there and be negative and bitch and moan and complain, but I look at it this way. You know what's negative? The most negative thing in the world? Dying. And you know what? One day, despite my best efforts, I'm going to die. It's like William Shatner's song on Has Been. I'm going to die. Everyone dies. And to me, that's the ultimate negativity. The ultimate negativity is death. Death is everywhere. Death is everywhere. There are flies on the windscreen, if you're a Depeche Mode fan. Death is everywhere, and I'm going to die. Like William Shatner saying, you're going to die. So that's the ultimate negativity. So dwelling on negativity, look, I was not in a concentration camp in World War II. I didn't grow up in an impoverished or famished part of the world. I was lucky to grow up. First of all, people talk about privilege. I was lucky to grow up in the West, in the United States. Forget what color I am or what gender I am, in the 20th century. I would rather have grown up in the 20th century than probably any other time in human history. I mean, you go back, like, would I want to, maybe in Roman times? No, but in Roman times or in Greek, slavery was a part of life. No. There was better health care. You live longer, technology. I'm so happy so the world is full of all this great stuff. Negativity, the ultimate negativity is dying. Do I want to die? I don't. It's going to suck because the moment of my death, I'm going to realize, unless I get hit by a car, a rock falls on me or something, I'm not thinking at all. It's just wham and gone. But if I had to think about it, I'm going to lament the fact that, damn it, there's going to be a movie I haven't seen or a figure I didn't buy or a model kit I hadn't built or somebody I didn't tell them I love them that day. Something. I will regret. So not only do you die, but you're left full of regret. And knowing that's what's going to happen, why dwell on the negative? I think it's a lifestyle choice. It's a lifestyle choice. I choose to be happy. I choose to be excited about stuff. And I think we all could. And another thing is that I like other people. Negativity. I can't get into negativity because, look, I go anywhere I meet somebody else, somebody that has a story to tell I've yet to hear. That delights me. So, I mean, negativity, I don't know. Maybe if I went full, I couldn't go full on negatory, good buddy. Couldn't do it. The founder, 865, sends in a super chat and says, do you plan on doing a proper review on the recent Discovery episodes, whether on a dedicated Robservations episode or, say, Midnight's Edge? I don't know. I mean, honestly, I find Discovery Season 3 to be such a spectacular failure of the imagination on every level. I mean, I never thought that the Star Trek universe would be some low-rent Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome dystopian Italian ripoff of Star Trek. I mean, I think it's what they have done. They've made the most basic, the most uninteresting, everything they've done, the reason of the burn, all it's so, like everything. I watch every season of Discovery and I'm like, every season to me has been the same. I'm like, have you watched any or read any science fiction? What is it why am I watching? Why am I listening to this? Why have you chose to tell me this story? Like, you've got a crime boss, like, because the Orion Syndicate, we have the Orion Syndicate back, in Enterprise. So let's have the Emerald Chain now. Let's have a crime. Like, really? Really? In the Star Trek universe? You're just going to give us, basically a character from Buffy season 4 or something? Like Space Glory? I don't know. I mean, that's what you're going to give us? Really? I just, when I talk about it, I don't think I have much more to say. Otherwise, I don't know. On Midnight's Edge, I'll talk shit about Discovery. It bothers me that it's so just disappointing. Like, really? Talk about a failure of imagination. Alexander Wilson says, Kara Swisher had Hillary Rosen, former head of the RIAA, to discuss the recording industry. Is that the Recording Industry of America? Is that RIAA? To discuss movie streaming on a recent podcast. She says that eventually the one platform for a movie isn't going to work and they will start to license content to multi-platforms. I don't know. Meaning that having one streaming service is eventually not going to work and they'll license out movies again. I don't know about that. I don't know about if they could. I mean, maybe they'll do that, but I don't know. It really depends. I don't know if that's true. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I have to read up on that to have a good answer. Michael Preston sent in a super chat and says, I just binged Cobra Kai. It was great, but every parental figure should have been arrested and forced to go to parenting classes. PGS forever. Yeah, I kind of feel that way about most parents. Alexander Wilson says, death is peaceful because you know that person's no longer in pain. I know many people who have health issues and live with chronic pain. The most peace I've seen some of these people get are at their funerals. Funerals to me are a celebration of life. Alexander, I think you're right about that. My grandmother suffered from chronic pain for the last 10 years of her life, and it was horrible. She was never without it. She never was without that excruciating pain. And it became the dominant force in her life, and she became a different person. And it was really sad. She was basically, she was a vibrant lady that lived in this great house with my grandfather in Palm Springs, and they had fun and they were fabulous. And then she spent almost the last 5 years of her life in a home, and it was just the worst. So I think you're probably right about that. It is. I mean, death is a part of life as living, so not to be feared. But it is negative. I don't want to die. It's not, the idea is not a winner. James Rudge wrote in and says, "Hello, Rob. I hope you and everyone are doing well. It's been quite a while since my last letter to you. I was hoping to write more frequently, but 2020 had other ideas for me. Anyway, as we enter a new and hopefully brighter year, I thought I would discuss with you some of the shows and movies I've watched in 2020. Star Trek Picard, Discovery, and Lower Decks have been utter garbage. Picard was a betrayal of the character of Captain Picard just as much as The Last Jedi was a betrayal of Luke Skywalker. Lower Decks was lowest common denominator comedy at its best and insufferable trash at worst. Discovery, well, I stopped giving a shit about Discovery after they turned the Guardian of Forever into Doctor fucking Who. Speaking of Doctor Who, Series 12 and the holiday special, Revolution of the Daleks, have been the straw that broke this camel's back. I'm done watching any new Doctor Who until Chris Chibnall is no longer showrunner and Jodie Whittaker is no longer the Doctor. Chris Chibnall's stories are either mediocre affairs or bloated and convoluted stories that upend the last 58 years of established canon, and Jodie's performance as the Doctor is so generic that I've taken to calling her the placeholder Doctor, as she's the type of Doctor that writers use when writing sample scripts for a new Doctor before the role is given to an actor. Yes, Stephen Moffat's last years as showrunner were bad, but at least Peter Capaldi was brilliant, fun, and entertaining to watch as the Doctor. So until the Doctor and writing team get regenerated, I'm sticking with classic Who, which I can watch on BritBox, a streaming service that has all of Doctor Who on it, and a bunch of BBC and ITV shows. The only movies I got to see in the cinema this year were Tenet and Wonder Woman 84. Fortunately, I live in Western Australia and we've avoided the worst of COVID, so I could see these movies with not much trouble with my girlfriend. I thoroughly enjoyed Tenet, even if the dialogue was hard to hear, and I loved watching Wonder Woman 84 despite agreeing with you about its many, many, many problems. Let's just say that after the shit show that was 2020, I needed some much-needed reality-bending insanity, and Wonder Woman 84 had that in droves. Trust me, Rob, when I say that I quite enjoyed staying in Movie World 1984 for 2.5 hours out of the 365 hellish days of 2020. Also, you had in Australia, you had the fires at the beginning of the year. Also, while my girlfriend and I waited for Wonder Woman 84 to begin, the trailer for Dune played, and I'm so glad that Warner Brothers is keeping it a theatrical run only. Seeing that trailer on the silver screen was simply sublime. This is definitely a movie that needs to be seen on the big screen without question. My girlfriend and I also watched The Mandalorian Season 2, and it was a vast improvement over Season 1 for me, and I loved it, especially Luke's grand return since 1983. Speaking of my girlfriend, I showed her my top 3 classic Doctor Who stories, Genesis of the Daleks, Earth Shock, and the Cave of Androzani, and the Star Trek episode Mirror Mirror, and she loved them all. She wasn't bothered at all by the look of the effects or their apparent cheapness, which goes to prove that you don't need $100 million to tell a good sci-fi story. You need good writing skills, which neither of these writing teams of Modern Who and Trek have. As you have said many times, Rob, these jackanapes need to pick up some literary science fiction and take a note on how to write science fiction itself. Well, I best wrap this letter up now before I waffle on further. Once again, I thank you, Rob, for putting out such great content in 2020. It was a much-needed bastion, or Dieter bastion, from the madness that surrounds us. I will endeavor to write to you again in the upcoming weeks once I've gotten an internet connection back. Long story short, I'm moving house in a few days at the time of writing this. If you want, I can send in reviews of classic Doctor Who episodes now that I have them all easily accessible. Until then, I look forward to watching more Robservations. Live long and prosper, James Rudge. Well, thanks, James. I appreciate that. Yeah, send in. I love getting people's reviews of things. It's amazing. So yeah, which is great. So send those in. I'm glad things are working out. It wouldn't be a day without Omar94. Hi, Rob, moderators, and Post-Geek Singularity. Happy New Year to everyone. Let's go into this year on a hopeful note and see if 2021 will be better than 2020. I know this year now has an insane amount of movies slated for release, as many of those were meant to come out in 2020. My concern is if all these movies will release in theaters or not. There was that story some time ago saying AMC would be out of money by January, I think. If theaters do end up shutting down, which I hope doesn't happen, who knows what will happen to all of these movies, especially the ones whose studios don't have streaming services. It would become a very strange world and experience if there were no longer any movie theaters. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Omar, you are correct. Look, as we all know, I hope movie theaters stick around. I like movie theaters. I like seeing movies in the movie theater. So yeah, I want movie theaters to come back. I really do. Please, 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 please. It'll be. I mean, look, we've got the. I don't think we're gonna have movie theaters for a while, but we are getting vaccinated, so hopefully they'll come back relatively shortly. I would love to see No Time to Die in a theater in April. I just don't know if I'm going to, which would be a monstrous bummer, but we'll see. Jonathan Aldridge writes in and says, "Hi, Rob. As you have gathered, I was thinking about writing my very first letter for the past 500 episodes and not sure what to say. I now have what I want to say." Okay. I thought I would start from the beginning. Oh, this seems like it's going to be a long one, but I think it's going to be a good one. I thought I would start from the beginning. I was born in Bath, in Somerset, England, United Kingdom. I spent the first few months of my life in a village in Wiltshire called Dilton Marsh, and eventually at the age of 5, my parents moved to Reading, Berkshire, or Berkshire, or is it Berkshire? Reading, Berkshire. Unfortunately, a few years before I was 5, I had a rare form of epilepsy. This delayed my ability to learn. For years, I struggled. I feel behind in school and found interaction with pupils at school difficult. Either they were not into the same things I was into, or they would call me names and call my mother a bitch. Really? This would send me crazy. At the weekends, my parents would take me and my sister to my paternal grandparents' house in London in an area of Battersea called the Latchmere. My grandfather was a famous author and former war correspondent. My grandmother, part Jewish, part Arabic Egyptian woman born into a Coptic family in the time, and I knew her, she was an atheist. That's another story for another time. It was one evening that my mother, who is a daughter-in-law to my grandmother, was talking about me to my grandmother, and my grandmother, after seeing me and speaking to me, told my mother that she saw potential in me and asked my grandmother to protect me. It was from then on that my mother would go through anything I went through, practically giving up her entire life for me. At this stage in life, I was in special needs called Brookfield School in Tilehurst. My subjects were all the basic subjects: science, math, PE, RE, English, geography, citizenship, and later on sex education and history until I was 13. From 13 until I left school, all my history came from my historical documentaries. The documentaries gave me a sense of nationalistic patriotism. At the time, I was too young and too stupid to understand how dangerous, if not we keep a lid on these two things, can be. To make matters worse, my paternal cousins were living in France, so the discussions with history at home stayed peaceful if it was me and my sister and my mother, or with the rest of the family all over the place, and intense with my Swedish aunt talking about Sweden's empire, or my cousin Edward talking about Napoleon Bonaparte in France and the battles between the British and the English. My grandmother would then get intensely political and would turn the entire conversation to her birth in the Sudan, or as it was known in her day as the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. She would talk about General Gordon and the manner of his murder, and how, in the end, the British had to use machine guns and gunboats to crush any uprising and retake Khartoum. This is a hugely, insanely long letter that I'm going to have to revisit. And I could do a whole... I didn't realize this letter was so long. Listen, man, Jonathan, I got to put this letter on the website because this letter is huge. I don't even know how many letters it is. So if you will pardon me, I will put this up on the website. I hope you don't get mad with me, but if I read this, I would be here for an hour, and I was going to wrap. Or you know what? Maybe I'll save this. I'll save this letter and I'll read it. I'll read it later, because I was going to get off this stream. This would take me into the next hour, so hold off on that. I'm going to come read it again. Twirly Wolf sent in a super chat. Thank you for Twirly Wolf. Hi, Rob. Exciting news. My brother wrote, produced, and acted in his first feature film directed by Pacific Rim and 13 Hours actor Max Martini. I got to tell you, Max Martini came in and auditioned for us for Free Enterprise, believe it or not. Keep an eye out for the Manson Brothers Midnight Zombie Massacre. Keep you posted. Wow, that's cool. Well, congratulations. If you tell your brother next time he talks to Max Martini, tell him that I'm sorry I didn't give him the part. But I've always liked Max Martini as an actor. He's in Contact. And yeah, I'm a big fan. The founder 865 sends in a super chat and says, Discovery would be bad even if it wasn't a Star Trek show. It's not just a bad Star Trek show, it's a bad show, period. I would agree with you. I think you're absolutely right about that. I think it's a bad show because it's bad. Its writing is bad. It's a science fiction show that is fantasy and doesn't know it's fantasy. And it's maddening to watch. And the ideas are the ideas of what they think AI are. Don't get me started. Tom Jr. Jackson sends in a tip and says, Rob, I enjoyed both episodes of Let's Get Physical Media, and today's Robservations is another great one as well. You fuel the fire for collecting physical media in me once again. Thank you, sir. All hail the Post-Geek Singularity, and the mods are fantastic as well. Well, I have to tell you, I like all of my mods. They do a great job. I think for the most part they bust their ass, and they get nothing from it, but they will at some point. But I want to thank them for that, and all of the mods do a great job. And I think one of the great things that we have is the community here, and we don't look. The one thing that I hope that this community has is a place where people can go and have an open dialogue, a respectful, open dialogue. And that's what this is all about. People can come here and you're all part of the Post-Geek Singularity. And look, I have to tell you, look at the letters people write. That alone, the level of discourse here is, and I look, as I've said before, I just opened the door. I threw the party, but it was all of you who showed up. And I think one of the great things I love about the Post-Geek Singularity and this community is the level of dope discourse. And it's not me. I mean, it's not me. It's you guys. You guys are bringing the level of discourse. You guys, you girls, you gentle people, kind souls from across the 28 known galaxies, however you identify. That's what I think is great about this community. And for me to have the kind of interaction that we have is I think fantastic. And I'm glad that you have had your thirst for physical media fueled. I love that. I think it's great. Fantastic. And anyway, I guess I'm going to bring an end to this show. I have a talk with Elizabeth. I don't think we're going to do a whining about movies tonight. We'll probably do tomorrow. We've got Tenet is next, and The Seven Faces of Dr. Lau with Tony Randall is coming. A classic that is available on Amazon. So there you go. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, I'm going to bring this I'm going to bring this show to an end. I want to thank my moderators, all of them. I want to thank the Richard. I want to thank Justin Toner, who's here. I want to thank Joshua Levesque, who is here. I want to thank, I don't know if MC Blackcap is here, but I want to thank all of them for being here. I want to remind everybody, you can always go to the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page. You can go to the Whining About Movies Facebook page, the I guess Fully Articulated Facebook page, and Let's Get Physical Media Facebook page. If you told me that I was going to be doing 4 shows on this channel by the end of this year, I would have said, you's crazy. This is some crazy talk. But it is happening. Allie Scott sends in a super chat. I want to thank Allie Scott for sending in a super chat. Thank you very, very much. And yeah, so Whining About Movies, we're going to try and get back to a schedule of 3 movies a week. I know we're not doing a great job of it, but once we get out of this holiday weekend, we will be back. So there you go. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting this channel through not just tips and super chats, but also through your letters and your support and participating and all of those things. I hope everyone's staying safe. We're living in wacky times, folks. Wacky, wacky times. But anyway, I'll still be here. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to everyone, well, have a better day and a good week.